In this lecture, we will look at some of the technical options that we can implement to move data. There are many quick and easy ways that we can implement to quickly move large volumes of data. They are very easy to use, yet they are very flexible and powerful. They are being used on a regular basis in the real world. We will look at some of them next. SQL Select Into is very flexible. In this example, we are using Select Into to create a backup copy of the employee table. Before we do maintenance work on a table, we can use Select Into to quickly create a backup copy of the table. In case there is a problem, we can restore data from the backup copy. It's a common practice used in the real world. This Select Into statement is a little bit more complicated. We're selecting several columns from two tables. We are doing a SQL inner join. We have a filtering condition. The point is that we can use the required processing logic together with Select Into to get the data into a table. Once the required data is in the table, we can use other tools to move the data to another SQL server or to export the data into a file. SQL Server Management Studio is probably one of our best friends. We can do so many things with SQL Server Management Studio. We can do a lot of advanced database work with SQL Server Management Studio. For data movement, we can use Import-Export Data Wizard and Copy Database Wizard to quickly move large volumes of data into or out of SQL Server. Before we use the data movement features of SQL Server Management Studio, we want to make sure that SQL Server Agent is running. The data movement features use services provided by SQL Server Agent. It's very easy to start SQL Server Agent. Within SQL Server Management Studio, we right-click on SQL Server Agent, then start it. We can also configure our computers so that whenever our computers are started, SQL Server Agent will start automatically. To move data into or out of SQL Server using SQL Server Management Studio, we right-click on a database, select Text. Then we will see data movement options listed on the pop-up menu. The trick is that if we import data into SQL Server, we want to create the destination table with the required data types in advance. Otherwise, SQL Server will create a table with default data types for us. The default data types may not be what we want. There are two commonly used data formats for moving data into SQL Server or out of SQL Server: CSV and TXT. CSV stands for comma delimited. Excel is commonly used together with SQL Server. We can save a spreadsheet in either TXT or CSV format. Then we can import the spreadsheet into SQL Server. On the other hand, we can export SQL Server data in one of those two formats. Then the data can be further manipulated in Excel. Today, we have a lot reporting and data warehouse applications. We use ETL tools to move large volumes of data from one system to another. We use ETL tools to support massive data refresh for reporting and data warehouse applications. We can reconfigure the data during the data movement process. We can use SQL statements to customize the data movement process. We can use either operating system or database management system job scheduler to automate the data movement process. SQL Server provides an ETL tool, SSIS. There are several components contained in SSIS. Packages are used to organize all of the pieces of our data movement process. Control flows are used to configure the processing logic. Data flows are used to control or configure data movement activities. We can use variables and event handlers to customize the data movement process. Generally speaking, for most data movement scenarios, we just need to configure the data flow component. We can use default settings for all other components. Starting with SQL Server 2012 and beyond, SSIS is packaged as SQL Server Data Tools. Look for this icon to start SSIS. Backup and restore are commonly used to move an entire database from one platform to another, such as moving a database from the testing environment to the staging environment. Remember, when we take a backup, we want to use the compression feature. The compression feature can reduce the backup file size by up to 50%. The compression feature can also significantly cut down the time required to complete a backup. Within SQL Server Management Studio, we right-click on a database, select Text, then select Backup. The Backup wizard will open. Remember, we want to use the compression feature. If we just want to take a copy of a database without changing the routine backup schedule, we can check the copy only backup box. Once we have completed configuring the backup job, we can click on Script to have SQL Server generate SQL statements for the backup job. Replication is commonly used to synchronize secondary copies of a database with the primary copy. There are several roles for replication. Publishers are the primary database. Subscribers are the secondary database. Distributors help with the replication process. The data published by the primary database is called published data. Sometimes the published data is called articles. There are three types of replication: snapshot, transactional, and merge. Snapshot is an image of a database at a specific point of time. Snapshot replication does not process incremental updates. Transactional replication is commonly used in scale-out solutions. For instance, we can use transactional replication to maintain secondary databases of the primary database. For instance, we have a primary database used for order processing. We use transactional replication to maintain copies of the database or secondary databases of the primary database. Then we use the copies for reporting applications. By separating order processing from reporting, we can use transactional replication to accomplish that. If we separate order processing or transactional processing from reporting, then both types of applications will perform very, very well. Merge replication is commonly used to synchronize mobile devices with a centralized database. We also have some advanced technical options for data movement. Log shipping is commonly used in disaster recovery scenarios. We can use log shipping to maintain multiple backup copies of a database. Mirroring is commonly used in high availability scenarios. We can use mirroring to maintain a backup copy of a database. Always-on availability groups came with SQL Server 2012. It's a relatively new feature. We can have multiple backup copies of a database in always-on availability groups. Always-on availability groups can be used for both disaster recovery and high availability scenarios. This concludes the lecture on data movement implementation.